Before the mountains were named and before the stars found their place in the sky, our eyes sank on its own. A land unchained, untamed, and unremembered. It was not ruled by gods, nor shaped by the hands of man, but by rhythm. A rhythm older than music itself, a heartbeat of the wild magic that flows through the land. It was here that humanity first emerged, not as warriors, not as rulers, not even as survivors, but as listeners. They wandered the lands of fang and claw, never staying in any place for too long. They were creatures not of great strength nor monstrous size. Instead, they possessed something more elusive, the seed of understanding, of mimicry, and innovation. The winds carried whispers, and the earth echoed drums. Somewhere in the cacophony of nature, humans built the first totems. Each totem a melody, a spell sung through stone and bone and the ethereal world. The instruments of balance just as capable of offense as they were of defense. When struck, these totems channeled the rhythm of our eye. It was an era defined by music. For a while longer, or maybe no time at all, humanity continued on living their nomadic lifestyle, pounding their drums and humming the tunes of our eye. And if fate had taken a different turn, this would be where our story ended, in peaceful musical tranquility. However, it was not to be, as a chance discovery would change everything. It is unknown when and how the first ley line was discovered. The assumptions we can make from the present are as follows. A person or a group of people venture deep below the earth, eventually stumbling upon a ley line, a pool of pure mana glistening between the purple stones. From this pool, those people who had made treacherous journeys gave of themselves to our eye, their health, their vitality, in exchange for the power to shape the very essence of the land. Some would stay, throwing away their names and becoming watchers, guardians of the ley line, while others would return with the knowledge, changing the core of humanity forever. And so the age of totems would come to an end, as people now had the power to summon fire, shape the wind, freeze rivers, master toxins, and even summon the very souls of the dead. With the advent of mana, those among the tribes who were the most spiritual, those whose whole existence had been guided by the rhythm of the winds, came together to form an organized religion, one which to some extent followed the old totemic teachings, as they believed that magic flowed through everything and everyone. For you see, with the sacrifice to the ley line, humanity had forgotten the song of our eye, and yet a small part of them remembered the rhythm, but it was not the rhythm any longer. They gave it a new name. They called it the inner wind. It was your soul. It was in all. It was above all. And to corrupt or destroy it was the greatest of evils. With those newfound beliefs, the cabal of wind would be born, guiding humanity as per the five winds decree. The wind of fury, the wind of kindness, the wind of reason, the wind of passion, and your inner wind. During this time, magic and mana exploded among the tribes. Wind altars and giant temples were built all across the world, helping humanity get closer to the five winds. People learned to resist extreme temperatures, to get in touch with their inner wind, and more dangerous spells like conjuring of lightning or ethereal energy. As for the Cabal itself, the priests dedicated their lives to spiritual study, developing techniques to reveal lost souls and even summon them back into the material world for a brief duration. But their greatest discovery had been rune magic. The scholars of the time created an alphabet which functioned both as a conventional language system as well as a conduit for spells. Runes have a multitude of contexts depending on positioning, ordering, and inflection. Each letter's meaning can change drastically. Each rune also has a magical signature that cannot be passed down with just sketches. They use this newfound language to further advance society and magic, so much so that these runes would become the basis of a technological revolution. As the tribes of Arai grew, so too did their desire for unity. From this desire arose the Blue Chamber Collective, a confederation of tribes which shared a common belief: family above all else. And to them, everyone in your community was considered family. The Blue Chamber dedicated itself to communal well being and collective decision making, establishing laws which would judge people as bloodlines instead of individuals. For less offensive crimes, the whole family of the perpetrator must pay what is known as a blood price to the wronged party. The payment was typically done in small increments, especially when the family had limited wealth. In such cases, the blood price could last for generations. For more serious crimes, the punishment was typically banishment. On the surface, the collective preferred not to take lives, seeing it as a horrible waste, although in rare cases, in the most dire of emergencies, death had been used as a punishment. However, there would come a bloodline which the collective deemed the utmost of evils, and would continue to hunt down up until the present day, whether they knew of their ancestors or not. The Blue Chamber would establish its seat of power in Berg, the city of the Braves. There, the first council meeting would be held, and all future meetings that followed, and there the collective shadow would begin to take shape. The founding families of the Blue Chamber, Aberdeen, Sullivan, and Sutherland, would go on to form a secret organization known as the Cryptea, with the goal of guiding future generations towards the Blue Chamber's ideals, lest they be led astray. To that end, the founders enshrined all their knowledge and memories within an ancestral altar, so if future generations were in need of guidance, they would be able to answer the call. It would be some generations later that a Cryptian member, for an unknown reason, consumed the memories of her ancestors, using the magical power they held to transform herself into an immortal lich. Although her original name had been long lost to time, the name she would take on would survive through the apocalypse itself. She would be known as the Scarlet Lady, possibly due to her affinity for fire. The Scarlet Lady who would anchor herself to her descendants, the Scarlet Lady who would escape to the Scarlet Moon, the Scarlet Lady whose influence still stretches out to the present day. The Cryptia would swear vengeance and shift their goal from one of pure guidance to that of extermination. They would spend most of their efforts tracking down and assassinating her children, grandchildren, and all who would come after. The Scarlet Lady herself would begin to influence people and events from afar, with those descendants who were willing to die in her service transforming into burning men, while her creations, such as the Obsidian Elemental and the Scarlet Emissary, would serve as her vanguard. The Cryptia are still fighting this war and have even developed blood magic for the sole purpose of exterminating all connections to their ancient enemy. Throughout the lands of Aurai, there reside immortal beings who, although once human, through an immense influx of mana, have transformed themselves into something else entirely. The transformation begins when a mage undergoes a ritual, creating something known as a philanthropy, which hold their immortal essence, and as long as that philanthropy is not destroyed, the lich cannot be destroyed. For the Scarlet Lady, that was her descendants. Although not necessarily evil, immortality, being separate from one's soul and being perpetually soaked in mana, can do funny things to one's mind. Most liches develop unusual quirks and alien perspectives, leading them to live in isolation, most of which also develop their own century-spanning plots. The Plague Doctor, or the Jade Lich, feeds on natural corruption of Aurai. Natural corruption is a green poisonous mist, which is the antithesis of life itself. For the more negative emotion a being has when it passes, the more corruption would spread, and in some extremely rare cases, that corruption can grow and mutate. This is where the Plague Doctor thrives the most, although they have long since forgotten where they came from and who they were. The Jade Lich's memory of Tsar fortune persists to the present day. That is an ancient art long lost to time. Through some inexplicable means, Tsar stones, the toughest and rarest of all gems, can be forged into swords, which could slash through stone itself, and armor, which could even withstand the sting of a royal manticore. The Plague Doctor is perhaps the only one who still remembers the art of Tsar forging in the present day, although the nobility of Caldera have discovered their own unique process. During the centuries, the Jade Lich has gathered a cult of followers who worship them like a god. The Lightmender, or Gold Lich, was once a mage and scientist with a speciality in the lightning element. We know that the Lightmender had set up their workshop in Chersonese, where they managed to create artificial life. We know that there was a certain blacksmith in Berg a long time ago who fell in love with the Lich and created a weapon of both fire and ice as a gift. In the present, the Lightmender has made a new workshop for themselves in the Hallowed Marsh, a large tower stretching up to the clouds themselves. The tower is guarded by creatures of lightning and bone, protecting the Gold Lich while they continue to tinker with technologies far beyond human understanding. The Lightmender believes that every human being is cursed with corruption, and until the world is rid of them, it will never truly know peace. So the Lich is set on a goal of evolving humanity into something bigger, something better. A little over 100 years before the present day, Ellat was born in Levant, near the Abrosara Lake, to a prestigious family, one which held great influence within the cabal of wind. We can assume that young Ellat grew up in a pretty well-off and privileged household, a noble household. We know that he loved reading, philosophizing, and studying the magical arts, and we can assume that from a young age, Ellat had become infatuated with the world of Aurai, a world which through magic and science had all but begun to industrialize. Nowhere was this more evident than the Attic Plateau and its crowning jewel, the city of Harmattan. It was there where factories, machineries, and high-speed railways had taken over the region. It was there where the combination of runic magic and technology was most evident, and it was there where the smartest, most cunning, and most innovative minds of our time would be born. Although Levant, the capital of Abrasara, was not one to be left behind, the people of the lake had amassed a great deal of wealth through trade and, more importantly, the development and production of flintlock pistols. While it may have seemed that Aurai was on the verge of a technological revolution, the global socio-political system seemed to be headed in the opposite direction.
with the Blue Chamber tribes leaning more and more into a feudal society, the gap between the rich and the poor growing wider by the day, and the nobles believing themselves a higher form of life. Few are the things that hurt as much as being betrayed by everyone and everything you believed in, when those you admire turned out to be the exact antithesis to everything you held dear. As Ellat grew, he would slowly begin to see the corruption of this world and the weaknesses of the bloodline-centric nature of the Blue Chamber Collective. Something needed to change, and he needed to change it. Ellat would leave his family and the Cabal, becoming an itinerant monk, traveling all the way from the Impasse Range to the Kazite Islands, eventually forming his own tribe, one without a name, one who would preach discipline and betterment of oneself as well as those around you. Elat's tribe would journey throughout the land, gathering more and more followers and amassing more and more power, to the point where the Cabal of Wind would grow ever so fearful, labeling Ellat a blasphemer. And as that fear would turn into hate, murmurs of a plot would arise, a plot that goes against everything the Cabal stood for. Those at the highest echelons, those who had devoted their whole lives to the wind, would seek to strike down Elad, to turn his very soul against him. They would seek help from the Jade Lich acolytes, who would suggest using corruption to strike Elad from afar. Through an intense ritual, the Cabal would divert the entirety of Abrasa's ley line towards one goal. For 20 nights, the wind mages would use their own bodies as a catalyst, sacrificing themselves for one massive burst of energy, for a single attack that would not miss. In theory, this should turn Ellat into a crazed beast. It should have united everyone against Ellat and that had lost his mind. In the Cabal's words, it would be a scourge unto his very being. Ellat had made his way to easternmost part of the world, near Termontaine. Today we know it as the Gates of Catharsis, but back then it had been a nameless passageway. No one could ever predict what came next. One night, when Ellat was resting in his tent, he would be overcome by a sudden and immense pain, like his very being had been set on fire, like something was crawling from inside him trying to free itself. There where Elad had stood, a massive canyon had formed, and from it thousands upon thousands of mutated beasts. Ones of pure eldritch horror began pouring, one after the other, seemingly without end. Those beasts who would kill without mercy or reason, who would trample over nation, would become known as the Scourge. The Scourge attacked hard and quick, with Harmattan, the capital city of the antique plateau, being one of the first to be hit. When the Scourge attacked, the old nobles of Harmattan were quick to act, establishing golem manufacturing facilities and reorganizing existing factories towards the war effort. Factories that would be manned by ingenious researchers, engineers, and scientists of the Sorobor Academy. Those who were not part of the Sorobors, the common people, which were surviving one day at a time, would be conscripted into a makeshift army. However, that army was more of a meat shield than a fighting force. Its purpose was to gain as much time as possible until the golems were perfected. Meanwhile, all but one of these nobles would lock themselves in their high towers, as the lower city and its everyday people would become the wall which protected them. The one noble who would actively fight the Scourge was Lord de Verney, who would gather a team of Sorobor academies, and together they would spend every waking moment researching the Scourge and trying to perfect the golem technology. For the Scourge, they discovered immaculate, those Scourge creatures who wield weapons. The corruption seems to have done more than just mutate them from some animal. They are intelligent, powerful, unyielding in the face of death. They know no fear. They feel no pain. These monsters appear to almost be designed to be the perfect killing machines. They are, in a word, immaculate. Sublime shell. These sublime shells, as we call them, they are far closer to the jungle apes than the shell horror species seem to be corrupted from, but even smarter. Some of them appear to even be capable of extremely limited speech. Illuminator horror. Illuminators, they puzzle us all. They appear to be like mobile plants with no head or mouth to speak of, but their feet, they're shaped like human hands. Even the pure illuminators follow no sensible biology and appear to be strange and amalgams. Grotesque. These grotesques, they're similar to the Immaculates, but they lack intelligence of any kind. And here closer to the plant-like illuminators. Are they failed Immaculates, or are the Immaculates a superior version of the grotesque? As for the golems, well, they were a boon to Harmattan, as with their help, humanity proved capable of holding their own against the Scourge. However, one huge problem arose. The golems were created in such a way that it would require a living human to operate them remotely. Their puppeteers, as they would be known, would go into a coma as soon as they attached themselves to a golem, and prolonged exposure to the state would result in death. Harmattan would quickly run out of people they could use to operate the golems, and the war would take a dark turn. Late autumn, the Scourge are beating down the flimsy barricades. The golems are barely able to hold them off. There is little food, and no rescue in sight, though Upper Harmattan is just a few strides away. I know the legend that to partake of human flesh will bring down the wrath of all life, but my choices are starve, or take my chances that legend is just that, a legend. The choice is obvious. Second midwinter, rescue still not coming. Scourge are still roaming at our barricades. Timothy gave me old looks at our turn on watch. He said it was freezing cold and asked why I was not bundled in furs. I told him that I was not cold at all, and Jenna needed my furs more. In fact, I have not felt cold at all this winter. I worried that Timothy suspects. 12th midwinter. The legend is a sham. While everyone rations the last few rotten bread loaves and salted meat or chokes on poisonous scorched flesh in their desperation, I am full and strong, feeding just on the fallen alone. In fact, I have never felt stronger, never more keen and alert. Even Timothy suspects me. What can anyone do? They are all frail, starved, weak. I am strong. I am predator. They are... 18th midwinter. The beast is coming. I can hear it coming for me. It's clawing through the walls. It's screaming for my blood. It will devour me. I cannot get out. I cannot get away. I can stop. Kill it. 20th midwinter. There are 6 deep gouges on the page, almost like tally marks. Lord Dunaway had an idea to create a lich. A single person who would be able to control all the golems simultaneously. His first experiment resulted in failure, as the subject was burned to a crisp. The second attempt was also a failure, but they did discover that not everyone could become a lich. The subject needed to have a very strong will. With tensions high and time of the essence, Lord Dunaway flew into a rage, threatening all those who were loyal to him to be the next test subjects. That was the last straw for the Sorobor academics. And when it came time for the next attempt, it was Lord Dunaway who found himself as the experimental subject. However, this time it was a success, as Lord Dunaway himself had turned into a lich. Naturally, he was not entirely pleased with this development. However, his duty to Harmattan overshadowed his need for revenge, at least at the moment. Using the little window of time where there were still enough Scourge to occupy all of Turnow's attention, the Sorobor engineers would install failsafes, keeping themselves safe and keeping Turnovi with an isolated containment unit, while his placentary was put in the golem control unit. This allowed him to still control the golems, but all his other powers were restricted. However, it was still not enough, as immediately after the majority of the Scourge had been pushed back, the Verni would turn the golems against humanity and slaughter the engineers. Although still in containment, the Lich would vow to one day escape and exact his vengeance upon the Academy. Following the major victory over the Scourge, the Sorobor academics, who had witnessed the vile mistreatment of the common people, quickly overthrew the ruling class, opening the doors of Upper Harmattan and establishing a meritocracy. Meanwhile, due to the cabal draining all of Abrasara's ley line and the following Scourge rampage, all of the surrounding region had turned into a barren wasteland. The green grass had been reduced to dust, the giant lake had become a barren canyon, and the roaming animals were nothing more than bone. Initially, the people tried to fight back, and for a time it seemed like they would succeed, establishing their own golem production laboratory. It wasn't until a great scourge beast known as the Devourer had all but destroyed Levant that all hope was lost and the people abandoned Abrasar. It was in Moonzone, in the hollowed marsh, that humanity's true hope of survival appeared. While the Scourge were besieging the city, rays of light beamed down, obliterating the beasts. Ellat had returned. He had become something more than a man, more than a lich. Ellat had turned into living thought, an immortal being made of pure energy, residing in a place outside of time and space, known only as the in-between. Although people began worshipping him as a god, he did not see everything, nor was he all-knowing, and although his powers had been amplified tenfold, he was not all-powerful. Yet those of his followers which had survived the initial Scourge outbreak would form the holy mission of Elad, with the goal of obliterating the Scourge once and for all. As for Elad himself, his newfound power allowed him to grant boons to his followers, helping them in the fight. It was then that the goal of the Scourge became clear, to eliminate Ellat once and for all, at all cost. But with him becoming pure energy, they were left to wander awry in a frenzy, going into a blind rage every time they encountered one of his followers. The holy mission would set off across the land of Aurai to fight the Scourge. Most welcomed their new saviors with open arms. However, some, such as the Chamber Lady of Cierzo, an avid Cabal worshipper, turned away the holy mission at her gates. Shortly after, dozens of Cierzo tribe were slain by the Scourge, and an enormous blood price was placed on her family, with the Aberdeens taking her place as Chamber Lords. Despite some initial setbacks, the Holy Mission was able to beat back the Scourge long enough for the vigil pylons to be established. Large crystal towers which trapped the living Scourge beast inside to be endlessly tortured by the ghosts of the fallen warriors. The monsters paying a warning to keep other beasts away. The Scourge rampage dealt a devastating blow to Aurai. Countless people and tribes were obliterated, technologies and history lost forever, and even the landscape itself changed beyond recognition. Most of the large cities, such as Burke and Harmattan, now remain only a fraction of their original size, and others, such as Levant, were completely destroyed. As for Darmotanen, the town closest to the Scourge outbreak, they would survive but take on a row of guardians, always on the lookout for another apocalypse. Ironically, the holy mission of Ellat would replace the Cabal of Wind as the dominant religion of Aurai and the official religion of the Blue Chamber Collective. One of the areas which suffered the least was the volcanic region of Caldera, partially due to their location. The town of Sirocco was built atop the largest volcano in the region, where the ancient art of smelting Tsar stone still lived, kept under lock and key by the nobles, and so the people were safe, at least for now. However, sinister forces were working in the shadows. The Scarlet Lady herself would send her descendants to mix and mingle with the nobles, further expanding her bloodline and influence over Sirocco. In the decades following the initial siege of Harmattan, the Sorobor Academy would become one of the most powerful factions in Aurai, making considerable advances towards technology, magic, and medicine, and in the process elevating their humble academy to an establishment everyone with an ounce of ambition would strive to be a part of, with the headmaster of the academy serving as the de facto ruler of Harmattan. As their influence grew, so too their silver, establishing the largest merchant and spy network the world had ever seen. They would also become one of the only factions actively trying to rediscover the lost history of Aurai. As for Monsoon, it would become the sanctuary of Ellat and the holy mission, being the only tribe represented by two chamber lords, one for the common people and one for the worshippers of Ellat. And so the song endures, woven through wind and flame, through bloodlines and broken oaths, from the first drumbeat beneath the stars to the whispers of gods and liches. Aurai has never ceased its rhythm. It is a melody of triumph and ruin, of voices forgotten and yet eternal. For as long as the winds still wander, the earth still remembers. The song of Aurai will never truly fade. Thank you for watching.